There are a lot of opportunities, but also a lot of challenges in the world of civil engineering. And in this episode of the Civil Engineering CEO, Dave DeLizza, President and CEO of Pennoni, is going to share with us some of the opportunities and challenges and things that you should know as a rising civil engineer to be aware of, and also some things that you can do to really advance your career and kind of be cutting edge as opposed to just going through the motions and following some of the things that we used to do in the engineering profession. Before we jump in, I do want to recognize our sponsor for this episode, BIGTIME.
Oh my God, this is amazing. I love it.
Got it. Wow, Dave, this is amazing. This is really, really cool.
The software is great. I love this program.
These are the real reactions of BIGTIME customers when they first toured the software. BIGTIME gives engineering firms the visibility they need to operate more efficiently and maximize profits. From project creation to client payments, BIGTIME streamlines operations with intuitive budgeting, project management, and invoicing solutions. Schedule your tour of the #1 rated professional services automation software at bigtime.net. All right, now I'm excited to welcome on my guest, the Civil Engineering CEO today, Dave DeLizza. Dave is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Pennoni. Dave is a licensed professional engineer. He has over 40 years of civil engineering experience. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Anthony. Good to see you.
So let's get started learning a little bit about the company. Dave, tell us about Pennoni. Where are you located? What are some of the services you offer? How many offices, employees, and so on?
So, Anthony, Pennoni was started in 1966 by Chuck Pennoni basically as a one-man structural engineering shop. Chuck is our founder, obviously, and still our chairman of the board. Today, we are 1,100 people working in 35 plus offices. Our geography extends from Boston down to Miami, and our furthest office west is Columbus, Ohio. Our revenues are in the $200 million range, and we're headquartered in Philadelphia. Our service lines are transportation, civil engineering, surveying, planning, environmental, mechanical, electrical, structural, just about anything that goes along with developing infrastructure.
That's great. And so let's talk a little bit about you, Dave. I know you started at Pennoni kind of when it was a very small company, and of course now you are where you are as the CEO. Tell us a little bit about your career journey.
So, yeah, I started at Pennoni as a Drexel co-op in 1976. And at that time, I was a rod man on the survey crew. And then I was able to work for Pennoni for the additional co-op periods. So there were 3 co-op periods in total. And I worked at Pennoni all 3 years. So when I got out of Drexel, 1979, many moons ago, an opportunity presented itself for me to join the staff at Pennoni full time. And I just thought that was great. I think the company might have been 45 people at the time. And as I said earlier, we're at 1,100 now. But, my journey is really, when I think about it, I don't believe that people just get to where they get to by their own efforts. I mean, there's always somebody pushing you and pulling you in the right direction. And I think my journey at Pennoni was just that. I always had great mentors that were willing to teach me not only the engineering part. You have your classes in school, but then you get into the business and you're working on engineering projects. So, you've been through this. You come into a firm, you start working on a civil engineering project. You might have one task to handle, then you have a couple of tasks, and then somewhere down the line, you start managing a project. Then you got some people you're managing, and eventually you get some clients to manage, and then you get an opportunity to develop your own clients. So I always had people here, and Chuck Pennoni would be one of them, and guys like Rick Piccoli, who are still on our board today, that kind of always pushed me in that direction. Handling clients and developing those relationships. So you're developing relationships on the outside as well as on the inside. And one of the other things I think that really helped me was that I enjoy learning. So to this day, I enjoy learning. I like reading books and about different things, whether it's history or biographies or whatever. So I always wanted to learn the next thing in our business. And as the firm started to grow, I had opportunities to move up in the company. I went from being, a project manager to managing my own office, to managing in a region, and then eventually I was managing business development and new initiatives and mergers and acquisitions for the company, which kind of propelled me to the COO level and eventually to the CEO position in 2019. So it's been a pretty good run. But I owe a lot to, I worked hard, of course, that's the standard answer, but a lot of people pushed me, which is good.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I hope to do the same to some people now. So
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Let me ask you this question about that. A lot of engineers get into civil engineering and say, "Hey, I want to go into management." Okay, and I think a lot of companies there is a path for that, right? You become a project manager, you get into more to management. But for you at this point in your career, you're CEO of 1,100 person company. So was there a point for you where you said, "I want to get into the high levels of leadership at the company," or was it something like you said where people just kept kind of pushing you, supporting you, and just kept going? I'm curious as to how that happened.
well, I was never afraid to take on challenging projects. And I think the people that I worked with and for maybe recognized that, and they gave me challenging projects. When I started way back at Pennoni, I never said I'm going to be CEO one day. It just kind of evolved, I guess is the best word. And I think maybe when I started doing the merger and acquisition and the initiatives for the firm, that would be 2005, was when I realized, hey, there's an opportunity where I could move up in this firm and move up further. And then when I became chief operating officer in 2014, I was there for 6 years and eventually to CEO. So for me, I guess it evolved. I never designed a career where I'd be moving from a co-op to a CEO. It just, again, happened. And I just attribute that to wanting to learn and the people that I worked for recognizing that.
Yeah, that's great. I think you make a great point there, Dave, in that if you're the person that gets involved with these projects, big projects, you jump on them, you do a great job. I mean, you're only going to continue to get recognized. So for those of you out there that when there are opportunities that arise, if you jump on those opportunities, you work hard and you deliver. I mean, you're only going to find opportunities, especially in this industry right now. I mean, the way things are moving. So I think that that's great. So Dave, what would your staff say is your management style?
Um, I like management by walking around. During COVID times, obviously, I'm here in our Philadelphia headquarters. We're at about 35, 40% capacity, but I do try to walk around each day and just talk to people and see what's on their mind. And I really like to get to know people, people at all levels of the company. And I always have an open door here that if they want to come talk to me about something with the company, something in their own career, some way I can help them. I mean, I just think people did that for me, and I just think I got to push that down the line. I owe it to the group, and so do the other senior people here. We owe it to the group behind us to kind of push that down the line. I mean, Pennoni's an employee-owned company, and the more successful we are, the better it is for us.
That's great. I love that. And in fact, I just read a wonderful article about General George C. Marshall, and I should share it with you because you sound like you'd like to read, you'd enjoy it. And he was said to be one of the most effective leaders of our time. And what he said was about morale was that the reason that they were winning wars was the morale of the troops was so critical that he used to walk around and talk to every soldier he could talk to and ask them about their company, I mean, their families, their lives, what they're doing, just learning about them. And it helped him to be such an effective leader. So you really reminded me of that there and how it is important to kind of get out there. And like you said, during COVID, that became a little bit more difficult, but now I see companies are getting more back to being able in person, being able to walk around and kind of connect with people, which is just an important part of what we do in our industry. So,
yeah, and I think, just to follow up on that, Anthony, I mean, let's face it, the travel to the different locations, office locations that we have has been very limited. But I normally, and other senior managers here, we'd like to get out to some of our outer offices and some of our larger offices, again, just to get to know people and to let them know that, hey, we're available here and our job is to help you all be successful.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the pulse and the heartbeat of the company, right? Getting out there and hearing what people are saying for sure.
Yep, exactly.
So we've gone through ups and downs over the last few years. We've had a lot of shifts. How do you, as someone who's a leader of a company where kind of everyone's looking to you at how you react to things, how do you prevent yourself from overreacting or underreacting? How have you dealt with some of these highs and lows?
Well, for me, I mean, I do my best to keep the emotions out of the decision-making process. And I think, you always have to look at, get all sides of the story, get the facts that you can get the facts, whether it's a personnel issue or COVID or anything else. And then I think you just got to be fair to everyone involved, take a look at a situation, decide what the pros and cons are and how that situation or decision that you're going to make may affect the firm either positively or negatively. And then that's what you got to go with. I mean, I know sometimes, you got to say, oh, I'll wait for all the information to come in, but sometimes you don't have that luxury. And you got to go with what you got, go with your gut sometimes. But I look at it this way. I'm not going to tell you that every decision I made has been right. that wouldn't be true. But I think the important thing is when you look at the upsides and the downsides of every decision, even if it's not the best decision, make sure that the downside is not too severe. So that's what I've always tried to do. Again, we're engineers, right? So you try to get into the details of things,
Right.
and then figure out, okay, if I do this, what happens? If I do that, what happens? So that's kind of the approach I've always taken.
No, I think that's great. And I think it's a good approach. And I think what's an important piece to take away from that for me is we tend to try to want to look at the upside of things. We want to look at the positivity and what's coming down the road, but you also need to understand your downside and what your risk is. And I feel like sometimes we forget about that. And someone in a position like yourself, I mean, you can't forget about that because the downside and the risk could be very detrimental to obviously a company moving forward. So it's a good perspective, I think.
Yeah, and I think that to add to that, I mean, I've got a board of many people on the board were CEOs of engineering companies or other companies, so I can always run things by board members. I've got our in-house senior management team, the legal counsel, CFO, chief operating officer, and when we need to, our senior management team can get together and kick around some of these discussions. Again, look at the facts and decide where to go. So you collaborate on things also when necessary.
Sure. That's great. And it's great to have that, have that team of people around you for sure. So Dave, how do you see technology changing the world of civil engineering? I know Pennoni is really on top of this. I've talked to people there. You're keeping an eye on things. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Well, when I think back to, as I said, I started working as a co-op on a survey crew. At that time, you had a 3-person survey crew. And if you were working in traffic, you had a 4th person, maybe doing traffic control. Nowadays, our survey crew is 1 person with a robot or a pilot flying a drone. So, obviously the equipment being used has changed things tremendously. And, some of the things we're working on here, if you add that to the whole digitization, reality capture, all the other technologies that we're working with, the software packages that different parts of the company uses. I mean, technology is changing the business and has changed the business in a big way. We're a long ways from hand drafting and using a scale and a T-square. And now we're doing things on computer and everything else. And, you can look at existing conditions by getting digitized photographs, or we have a whole group here that does a lot of reality capture, and we do some 3D animation. And frankly, those are all good things because we have the younger staff that know how to use all those tools. But frankly, I think our clients expect it. They now expect to see things. And I think back to, going to board meetings or whatever for projects where you took a set of plans and you colored them up, green for the grass and black for the paving, and you brought it into the meeting. I mean, nowadays you can go with a laptop and show something on the video screen.
Yeah.
And for the layman who's on a planning board or whatever, it really brings a project to life. And those are the kind of things that many of our people are doing right now. We're doing it with transportation projects, with civil projects, and even just doing existing conditions of facilities that we're working on. So it's really exciting. in a lot of ways. And again, we have the talent on board that can get us into these things.
So is that what you do, Dave? You kind of have people that are kind of keeping their eye on these different softwares and programs and kind of updating you and things like that?
Yeah. Yeah. So, we might have, you know, I was never a gamer. I know you may have been, but you have people that might have been gamers who know how to use all these
Right.
new tools.
Right.
I know my kids used them, but I never did. But yeah, we have those types of people on staff who understand the software and can use it and can do things with it. Another good example is one of our young people. I'll name her, Elise Paulson. She's actually a mechanical engineer by education, but she works in our corporate communications department. And Elise can take things and bring them to life, working with our engineers
Great.
and put a storyboard together and put a video together. And it really helps you, especially when you have to, if you're trying to sell a project to a client, or if you're going to a public meeting to display
Sure.
a project. And those kinds of things are just invaluable to get, people want to see visual things. So it's really some good stuff and I'm really proud of what some of the things are doing.
Yeah, and you make a good point, because not only do these tools make us more efficient and we can work faster, but also you get approval faster potentially if somebody understands what you need, whether it's funding or a planning board. If they can understand something, they can say, yes, this works for our community, let's go with it. As opposed to, I remember when I was at planning board meetings, we'd have to come back how many months to show them different parking lot designs and different drainage designs, right? So that's a game changer.
Yes. Yeah, that and some of the other things that we talked about, the 3D, the reality capture, all kinds of good stuff that some of our engineers in different offices are also working on. So you're right, it helps sell a project. Many times, if you stood in front of these planning boards, I mean, you have elected officials that aren't engineers, so they didn't understand a 2D blueprint that was colored up to show them, here's the building, here's this, here's that. But when you show a 3D picture, it really does help bring that project to life.
Yeah, for sure. So Dave, we're going through a little bit of a cultural shift right now with COVID. There's a lot more work from home jobs. Talk about how that has changed Pennoni or the industry in general, and how that might affect projects or construction in the future and how these projects get executed.
Well, again, being a person who always worked in project teams, I was always used to that give and take, sitting around a table, reviewing a set of plans and all that good stuff. Uh, um, Obviously, the pandemic has changed a lot of that. We do have many people working from home. But the good news is that, I think our managers are still doing the QA, QC required to keep the jobs moving forward. Most of the CEOs I talk to in this industry are saying the same thing. We haven't told people, we haven't demanded they come back to the office. We've been trying to play that by ear. Again, every time a new variant comes out, your dates are pushed back. So we're kind of just rolling with the flow here and doing our operations and trying to work it so there's the least impact on getting projects done for clients. So for young engineers, what I do worry about is that whole mentoring thing we talked about earlier, having somebody to show them. And I think that'll eventually come back once people start getting back to the office. I'm not sure we'll ever get back to 100% office occupancy. I know firms talk about doing that, but then things happen and they kind of delay that for a while. But on the construction side, I mean, let's face it, if you're working in the field, you can't work from home. you got to be there building things. You got to be there laying things out. So that will have to continue. But I think a lot of the computer work can be done between the combination of office and work from home.
So Dave, how are you gauging like the comfort level of your staff? Do you survey? Do you talk to people about, is it time to come back, or how does that balance work?
Yeah. So as I said, we haven't, I hate to use the word mandate, but we haven't mandated
Right.
that people come back in the office. I think each location, we again, having 30 plus offices, some locations never shut down and others did. Here in Philly, we were down to a smaller crew. Now we're back to, like I said, 35-40% of the people coming in. I think you just got to, play it by ear as it goes here, and then, figure out how to minimize the impacts on the business. I can tell you that our workload is solid. We check utilizations of people, they're good. We check our monthly financials and multipliers on projects, they're good. Cash collections are good. So all the typical parameters that we always checked before the pandemic, they're still the same things we're checking during the pandemic.
Right.
And if we see a slippage anywhere, then we got to do something about it.
Sure. So, Dave, there are all kinds of infrastructure funding initiatives going on throughout the country today, throughout the world, quite frankly. What do you think that the impact of these bills and this funding will have on our industry?
Well, the $1.2 trillion is nothing to sneeze at, right?
Mm.
So, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, for a company like Pennoni, we're 50% public, 50% private. So our client base will see a lot of those funds eventually coming to them, and we'll have opportunities to do work, whether it be bridges, roads, water, sewer. I think that one of the good things when you look at the list of projects being funded, it's split up pretty good among power, transportation, water, wastewater, just about every kind of sector, obviously to varying amounts, but those are all the sectors that we're working in. So I think for firms like ours and many, firms smaller and larger, I think it'll be great opportunity. So it's good for the industry.
And do you think that this is something we're going to see sooner rather than later, like actually see it?
I think we'll start seeing some funds flowing sometime this year.
Okay.
I know the bill passed, whatever, a month or two ago, but I think that funds will start working their way down to the states and to the local counties and municipalities sometime later this year.
Okay. All right, great. Dave, what does diversity and inclusion mean to you, and how does Pennoni encourage and support them?
Well, I was just on a call this morning with the Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce. We have they have a CEO to CEO call, and this was the topic of discussion. To me, it's quite simple. Diversity and inclusion is making sure that everybody gets opportunities, regardless of whatever classification or group you want to put them in. And for Pennoni, the discussion this morning was, well, is it the right thing for business? Well, I like to think that we're a firm that always does the right thing. But it's not only right for business, Anthony, but I think our staff demand it. Our staff want to know that they work in a company who takes these matters seriously and takes action towards it. We've always supported local schools, colleges, county colleges, you name it, businesses on initiatives to help people further their careers, whether it's with dollars or our people mentoring people or all of the above. We'll continue to do that. Again, working with a lot of different businesses here in the city as well as in other places that we can bring on board our teams. That's obviously another opportunity to help some of these businesses come along.
That's great. It's good to hear that. And it is something that I think it's great that it sounds like you're focused on at Pennoni. And I think also as an industry, we need to be focused on it. We did a podcast episode recently where a working engineer is talking about he's going out in underrepresented communities to schools and doing STEM talks and engineering talks. And it's great because it's something that, listen, the whole industry is going to be affected if we're not working on it together, and we're not going to have the different diverse perspectives that we need to have in our industry with all the challenges coming on these projects. So it's good to hear that you guys are focused on it. All right. Couple of questions here, Dave, that we get often from civil engineering professionals that I'm going to throw at you. What is the number one trait that you feel is important for civil engineering professionals to have today?
I was thinking about this, and I actually wrote down collaborator, right?
Yeah.
So we talked earlier about projects are getting larger, they're more complex. And, when I got into my first job that I worked on at Pennoni, I was handling, some hydraulic issue on a project. But now the projects, if you're doing a project here in the city of Philadelphia, you got to deal with the neighborhood organizations and planning boards and all those. You got to deal with the other professionals. You got to deal with architect, other engineers that are on your team. So for a civil engineer, especially because you're dealing with so many disciplines, you really need to be able to collaborate with people and be able to understand all the other disciplines working on that project and how everything fits together. Because at the end of the day, as we've talked about, you're going to be the one going to the planning board and talking about these things. And part of that, Anthony, is awareness, right? So you can't design a project in a vacuum. You got to be aware of the surrounding area, the surrounding geography. How does this building affect traffic flow? How does it affect this or that? How does this road affect the other areas or this development? So for the civil engineer, especially for that part of the profession, I think that projects are more intense, but again, they also provide a greater learning experience. There's probably, I think about some of the things our municipal engineers do, and I know you've been through this. You really get a chance to work with elected officials and the public, the regulators, on getting projects built. And again, it might depend on the size of the project as to how many of those people are included, but it's really an education in itself of being able to navigate and collaborate to bring a successful project home for your client.
Yeah, that's a great trait, collaboration or collaborator. And I'm laughing a bit because, when you sign up for civil engineering in school, you have no idea that you're going to do most of those things that you just said, right?
Exactly.
You're going through calculations, you're taking exams, you're not thinking about politicians and being in front of the public and trying to explain your project to someone who has no idea what a stormwater system is, right? So it is important, and it's not the schools. I always qualify that by saying it's not really the school's fault because they're held to strict curriculum guidelines. Of course, they need to get all the technical stuff in there, but that also goes back to the companies having to be able to educate and train their engineering professionals on these collaboration skills, these communication skills, because you will need those to be successful in the world of civil engineering. It's not you may need them, you will need them, because you're going to have to deal with all types of people, like Dave said. And so I think it's great that, someone like Dave points that out, because we all need to be thinking about that from day one in your career. How are you going to build those skill sets that aren't the ones you get, from school?
Yeah, my someone once asked me here at Pennoni, well, how did you start going to the public meetings at night to represent your clients? My background, Anthony, as you probably know, is I was a municipal engineer, water, wastewater type projects authorities I was working with. And it's really actually a funny story. I remember Rick Piccoli, who was one of my mentors here at Pennoni. He took me to a meeting when I first got my license, and he said, "I want you to come to the meeting with me." And I said, "Okay." I go to the meeting. I meet some of the clients. He said, I want you to give the engineer's report. You wrote the report. I want you to give it. Okay, fine. So I give the report. The next month, the meeting comes up. He says, "Oh, I can't make it to the meeting tonight. Why don't you just go?" And, oh, geez, okay. So I did that. And then the third month comes up. "Oh, I can't make it tonight. You go." And you know what? In the fourth month, I was handling the client.
Right.
The client, he was checking on me, talking to the client. "Hey, how's he doing?" And I was off to the races. I mean, I started doing those things and managing clients and a bunch of projects. And, I enjoyed it. It was a challenge, and I like a challenge.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think that's a great point for those managers out there listening, is that you need to let some of your staff try these things. You need to trust them a little bit. You may be next to them the first couple of times they present, but if you don't give them a shot, you can only learn so much by watching. At some point you need to jump in and kind of try it yourself. Right. I mean, that's how we learn.
Yeah. And I think for your young engineers out there who are civils, I mean, the municipal market is a great opportunity because there's a need there and not a lot of people want to go into it. So, but it is a great opportunity and a great education.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of civil engineers ask me, "Dave, how can I make sure that I'm contributing value to my organization or adding value?" How would you answer that question for them?
Well, I think there's two answers to that. If you can contribute to your organization, you're also contributing to yourself, right? And the one thing that just go back to some of our previous discussion, the best way to make yourself more valuable to the organization is, again, to not be afraid to take on challenges, to make sure you do good work, make sure that you latch on to some of the mentors who may be able to help you. And if you could do those things, that helps your organization, and it also helps you as an individual. So if I go back to Pennoni being 45 people when I started, again, I just learned from whoever I could I did all kinds of projects, from climbing water tanks to climbing in sewers and all those great things. And, it was just great experience, great education, and I made myself more valuable. Get your licensing out of the way, right? Take your exams. Of course, now you have continuing ed requirements. So one of the things that I've done on continuing education for myself is I try to take courses on things that I've never done. So, things like learning about solar market or power. So, you can get outside of this civil a little bit and learn other stuff, because eventually you're going to need to know that stuff when you do put the whole project together. But learn how to manage projects, learn how to manage people. And I think you'll do your organization a great service as well as yourself.
That's great. And I really like the point you made there, Dave, about getting outside of your own discipline and niche. Like, for example, my wife's a geotechnical engineer, and I'm always telling her, listen, you should still learn what you can about structures, what you can about site development, right? Because these projects are so integrated that the more that you know about the different components, it also helps you to speak to clients much better and say, hey, I know you also need a structural engineer. You need to figure out what the sizing of the columns are going to be. We have that as well, or, we can help you with that. So I think that's a great point in our industry. To be well-rounded is very, very important.
Yeah, and I think, you bring up a good point, like the geotech engineers and the environmental engineers, on many occasions, they're the first ones in on a project.
Right.
They might get there before the, pure civils do. So yeah, that's important to be able to explain to a client all the things that are needed. If you know an area well, here's the things you're going to run into. We can help you, type thing. I mean, yeah, good
And
conversation.
I started my career the same way as you. I was in the woods holding a rod, and I'm thinking to myself, like, I didn't know this was engineering. It was 100 degrees, and I'm sitting here in the middle of the woods holding up a rod, and I'm saying, this is engineering. Like, but then when I got in the office and I knew how projects were shot in the field, I knew how the data was collected. It made the civil engineering design side of the project much easier for me, right? I kind of knew what was going on. So I think that holds true really throughout your entire career.
Yeah, and one of the things, that's a good point. One of the things that specifically, again, for civil engineers, if you can do it, get out in the field with your surveyors. It's just a great way to learn and understand. You can learn a lot from survey, because eventually you're going to be handed documents that they prepare that you're going to be working on. But it's always great to get out in the field and see these things, eyes on and then hands-on design approach.
Yeah, and I always remember when I would go back in the office and I was drawing in AutoCAD, I would be moving these lines around for these drainage pipes, and I'm thinking to myself, this can't happen the way I'm drawing it, because I saw what was going on in the field, right? So there's always things that you see that there's no way you can tell from a flat screen, and so that just makes it easier for you. I'm going to ask you this other question that I get often, and I'm going to qualify it after I ask it. What is the one business challenge I can solve that would make the single biggest impact on the organization? I think the underlying theme here is, what's a big challenge that a company like Pennoni that's growing fast and in a really good industry that you might face, and that someone in the company might help with and could be beneficial?
Well, right now in the industry, the biggest challenge that every CEO will tell you they have is finding talent. So, to be honest with you, how do you solve that? We've kind of looked at our merger and acquisition activities as ways to help with bringing new talent into the company.
Okay.
Because Anthony, there's not enough kids that are coming out of the engineering programs in the universities.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that do, I mean, the competition is hot and heavy from many of the great firms in the area here, as well as in other places that we're competing with for the talent. So everybody's looking for that 10-year, 15-year manager, and we always talk about how some of those probably left the business in 2008 when things really turned down. So finding people is the biggest challenge I see for this business, and the workforce is growing slowly. There's more people, older people retiring from the business. So I think that opens up the opportunities for some of the software packages that we use to do more of the work. I don't know, artificial intelligence. I mean, these are all the things that we talk about here that could take up some of that work. But for a young person, I mean, be like a sponge,
Yeah.
Soak up everything you can and learn, whether it's software packages or again, just working with mentors and picking their brains on projects they may have worked on. sop it all up and keep it somewhere
Yeah,
in your brain,
for sure. Be a sponge for sure.
Yep.
What are you most afraid about regarding the future of our industry, Dave? I know there's a lot of positives, but what do you, what do you,
Yeah, well, I think I'll just add on to what I said. I think the biggest challenge this industry is going to have, and it's not only engineers, it's architects and the construction, right? The whole AEC industry is people.
yeah, people. Yeah.
The projects are getting larger. The projects are getting more complex. So finding people to do the work. And again, if you look at people retiring from the fields, whether it be construction, architecture, engineering versus the number of people coming into the field, that to me is the biggest challenge for the industry as a whole.
Mm.
And as I said, Pennoni, we're trying to solve it by bringing in good people, and you're doing new hires and
Sure.
going to local colleges and recruiting, but also through bringing in good companies. And that's what a lot of the there's a lot of merger and acquisition activity going on right now in our business, and that's what a lot of it is about.
Yeah, I guess just from an engineering perspective, if you think about the equation, you got funding coming in, bigger projects coming in, and the same amount of people to do them. It's not going to add up well, in the long run. So,
Yeah, and I think it's an opportunity. I mean, we're talking mostly here about the United States, but let's face it, the opportunity for civil engineers on the international market
yeah,
is
huge.
just tremendous.
Huge. Yeah.
So there's opportunity worldwide for people with the right skill sets.
Yeah, it's an exciting industry for sure. All right, so just a couple of last questions kind of related to yourself. I always like to ask this question of CEOs because I know you have a million things on your plate. How do you actually decide, what you work on each day? How do you guide yourself in making those decisions?
Well, many times my decisions are made for me. So
I was going to say, is it reactive to what's going on?
Yeah, no, I've been lucky, Anthony, in this respect. I have a great senior management team here. So I've been lucky that I can be proactive on a lot of things. But each day, what I do, assuming I'm not going to be out at meetings and stuff like that, but try to prioritize what has to be done that day, whether it's reporting to our board on some issues or writing a report for our board or maybe some of the outside activities I might be involved in. But I try to check in each day with our senior management team in their different roles, the CFO, the legal counsel, the COO, to see if there's anything that I need to know about, if there's anything they may need my help on. And then I've been spending a lot of time lately, goes back to the growth question on looking at acquisition candidates for Pennoni.
Sure.
Because we want to keep growing. We're an employee-owned company. We're very proud of that, and we want to try to bring other companies into the fold here. So each day, I don't really have to worry about what I'm going to do that day because, set a priority, get those things out of the way, and then move on to some of the other things that help the future of the company, which is growth.
That's great. You said you like to read a lot. Is there a book that has been stood out for you in your career or?
Well, I've read plenty of engineering books, but I'm also a big history buff. I like world history. I like American history. And there's two books I just recently read. One was called The Accidental President, and it's about Harry Truman.
Okay.
And it's written by A.J. Bain. And the whole story is about the 4 months when Truman came into the office right after Roosevelt passed away. And I'll tell you, when you read this book, leadership, decision-making, the things he was dealing with, it's just amazing that Harry Truman was thrown on the world stage and obviously acquitted himself very well, right up to, he had to make the tough decision of dropping the atomic bomb on Japan. So, it really is a good insight into his thinking. The other book I just read, which may be of interest to civil engineers, is it's called The Essential Lewis and Clark by Landon Jones, I think is the author. And what he's done is he took the Lewis and Clark expedition and all of their field notes, their daily field notes, and he took excerpts of their field notes and he put them into this book.
Oh, wow.
And it's really interesting. You're talking early 1800s, but these guys are writing about what they're seeing in the country. They went from along the Missouri River out to the Pacific Northwest. I think it was 8,000 miles up and back. But, their interactions with the Native American tribes, establishing commerce with the tribes, I'm standing on a mountain overlooking and seeing 20 or 30,000 buffalo, So it gives you good insights in what the country looked like back then before it was developed. And still many of these places are undeveloped, but I really enjoyed reading that. I thought the guy did a pretty nice job, but it's kind of pure because it's their notes, their words.
That's interesting.
And he obviously had some of the words are different, the spellings and all that, but he did a great job of just kind of laying that out. And I got interested in it because I was in Arizona in October, and I went to one of the museums. They had a lot of stuff about Lewis and Clark. I said, hey, I got to buy a book about this. So I did. And I thought it was pretty interesting. But that's kind of the reading I like to do, is just to learn a lot of those things.
That's great. That's great. Last question, just to wrap up. I was wondering if there's any other civil engineering CEOs or just leaders that maybe you admire, or that do you get with other CEOs? Is that part of what you do in terms of development and learning?
Yeah, I mean, some of the outside organizations, Anthony, the ACEC, ASCE, the Design Professionals Coalition, the Chamber of Commerce here in Philly. I get a chance to interact with a lot of CEOs, and again, it just goes back to the learning process. But there's a few people that I've really enjoyed my time with, although I see them maybe once or twice a year, but it's always discussions like these that we have about the future of the business and, bringing our people along. But I think of guys like Nick DiNiccolo at Mott McDonald.
Yeah.
Nick, he just recently retired. Great guy.
He's great.
Greg Kelly at STV, another guy that's been around for a long time. I don't know if you know Steve Lefton at Kimley Horn.
No.
Steve's a good guy. Kimley Horn, a great firm. Satch Picori at Hanson Professional Services. They're out in Illinois. So learned a lot of the people that I interact with. I think one of the things that I enjoy is that I could pick the phone up and call any one of those guys, CEO to CEO, and say, hey, how are you handling these things? We do a lot of that. Our lawyers may call their lawyers, our CFO and their CFO. And one of the things I like about our business is we're not afraid to share stories and war stories and learning opportunities. So that's one of the things I've always enjoyed about this industry in particular.
No, that's great. I've been hearing that from a lot of people in your position, that there seems to be a really good, kind of partnership amongst leaders in our industry, that they do get together, they do talk things out together. And I think that's great. And I think it's only going to help the industry as a whole with some of these challenges that we're all facing together, to be able to kind of navigate them and move past them. So,
that's one of the other things, Anthony, just for your young civil engineers out there, take advantage of opportunities to get involved with ASCE, ACEC, all these kinds of organizations where you can meet these people and just learn. They have a lot of great programs now online that you can learn, webinars and all that. So those are all, again, good opportunities for the young civil engineers going forward.
Well, Dave DeLizza, President and CEO of Pennoni, I want to thank you so much for spending some time with us here on the Civil Engineering CEO. I really appreciate the time, Dave.
Thanks, Anthony. It's always good to see you.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation today. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel here. We put out videos like this on a weekly basis to help engineers become better managers and leaders. We'll see you next week.